Perfect. Okay, let's fire away. So yeah, as Lev mentioned, I have been studying Purview the last couple of weeks, and today I want to give you a quick introduction into what it is, where it comes from, and how you can use it and how businesses can use it in general. As a quick setup, Purview is still in public preview as of today. It's been there for the last 9 months. No one really knows when it's going to move into GA. We are hoping that it's going to happen soon, maybe by the end of the year. If not, then hopefully early next year. But yeah, Microsoft hasn't announced any specifics yet. But for this presentation, I wanted to begin by outlining the problem that we as data scientists and so many businesses around the world have when it comes to big data and when it comes to data sources. The first one is related to the sheer amount of data that we are collecting. I found 2 pretty astonishing stats. The first one is that 90% of all the data that currently resides on servers or on some kind of storage systems has been created over the last 2 years. So this just shows you how fast our rates of data collection are growing. And at the same time, by 2025, 80% of all our data will be unstructured, meaning that, we are collecting all these informations and all these data types and all these files. But are they really useful? Not really, because we don't really know where they are, how we can use them and what they mean. So this is obviously a big problem, especially if you keep in mind that your data sources, they reside not on one system. Oftentimes, especially nowadays, you have data on premises, you have data on your cloud, you have data coming from streaming services. So it's extremely complicated to get a good overview about your data and see where everything is located and kind of get a sense of what you can use and what you can't use. You have, for example, CSV files, Power BI files, tabular files, text files. So there's no one easy way to understand your data estate. And then at the same time, you have this movement where you have new regulations coming in, be it from government organizations, be it from internal company policies that you should take care of your data in better ways, ensuring that nothing gets leaked, ensuring that nobody has access to data that you shouldn't see, that at the same time people see data that they should be able to see, and that nobody gets blocked by an internal firewall that just blocks everyone. So you have one side of the coin. On the one hand, you are collecting more and more data, and on the other side, you want to take care of that data in better and better ways increasingly. And this is exactly where data governance comes in, and where Azure Purview will come in the future. Let me close this down here. Okay. So what is data governance? Currently, there are numerous companies on the market that deal with data governance. I've only mentioned a couple here. The most famous ones, you have Alation, Collibra, Apache Atlas, which is extremely linked to Purview. I'll talk about it in a second. Further, you have Talent, Ignite, Informatica. Those are all companies that offer data governance services. And essentially what they do is they help you to create certain decision rights and accountability frameworks for handling your data. So they want to make sure that the sourcing of the data is done right, that people have access to the data they need, that you can understand your data estate, that you can see relationships between certain databases, between certain types. And doing that's kind of the proposal of data governance, can help you to really understand your data. And only if you truly understand your data, you can make meaningful analytics decisions out of it. So there are numerous competitors in the market, and why the heck should we care about Purview then if there are more than 12 out there? And that's a very good question. And I asked that myself for quite a while, and I finally was able to come to a conclusion. So Purview is great because it's, for the first time ever, Microsoft has come up with a unified approach to data governance. In the past, they've had services like Data Catalog or Microsoft Information Protection. And now they've kind of all integrated these services into one software. But like Lev mentioned earlier, Microsoft wouldn't be Microsoft if they wouldn't buy another company or incorporate another company into their solution. So what they have done is they have built Purview on Apache Atlas. So they have built the entire software on an open source software called Apache Atlas. And I will go into Apache Atlas on the next slide. But for now, all I wanted to point out is the way Purview works from a 30,000 feet kind of overview perspective. So here at the bottom in this picture, you can see that you have your different source types. So you have your on-premises or your cloud servers, you have operational data, you have analytics and software as a service data. And what you do is you link those services to Purview. And once they are linked to Purview, Purview can scan them and classify them. I'll show you a quick demo later or how it looks in Purview Studio, but essentially once you've scanned your data, Purview and Apache Atlas under the hood will automatically create a data map for you, meaning you can link your data sources, you can get an overview about them, and you can visualize how each data map is related to each other. Once that's done, you can actually use the user interface on Purview. So the user interface is pretty neat. It's 5 key features. The most important one, I would say, is the search feature as well as the lineage feature. For example, in search, you can use semantic search to browse through the data catalog and quickly access the data you need without writing complicated queries, without using code. It's all done under the hood. It's all done for you, and it saves you tons of time. You can define business terms in the glossary. This is extremely valuable for bigger organizations where you have so many people accessing the data, and not everybody will understand what a certain piece of data is. So you have to make sure that there are certain definitions that people can access to understand, okay, this database has this kind of information in it, and I can use it in this kind of way. And that's basically all the business glossary is about. Finally, you have the lineage. The lineage is kind of the workflow of the data. It tells you, this database relates into this Power BI output. So it's kind of a visualization for you to understand your data in a more detailed way. And then finally, the last thing I wanted to go over with is the Data Insights tab. This is basically like an external dashboard on Azure Purview. So it gives you kind of key metrics on your data estate as a whole. You'll see pictures later, but essentially it gives you information about how big your data estate is, how often you've scanned it, what kind of glossary terms you have. So it's more like an overview for you to really, really quickly understand what data you're dealing with, where is it scattered around, and how you can make sense of it. And then here again, you see that this unified platform on the right, it's built on open APIs. In parentheses, it said Apache Atlas. So Apache Atlas runs all of it, most of it on the back. So I need to explain quickly how Apache Atlas works without going too deep into detail because it's a presentation on its own. So essentially Apache Atlas joined the Apache family in 2015. Before that, it was called Atlas. The main thing, or the most useful thing I found, was that it actually stores the metadata from the data tables and all your data sources in JSON files. So and these JSON files are not stored in normal databases, they are stored in graph databases. So essentially what a graph database is, it's nothing like a normal database where you have information that's stored in rows and columns. A graph database actually stores data in nodes, and each node can be connected to other nodes, and the connection is stored in edge. So the information about the connection is stored in edges. And therefore you have more flexibility when it comes to storing data. And it's also faster in querying it. So for example, if you have metadata from a CSV file and metadata from, let's say, a Power BI file, the metadata will naturally have different columns. So you can't really relate them in a normal database. And that's the reason for why you have to use a graph database in order to store the data. So this is just a little bit of background information regarding how Apache Atlas and how Purview stores the data. And you actually don't need to worry too much about it, but it's very good to know because it helps you to understand how it works under the hood. But let's get into the interesting part, or the more practical part, I'd say, and look into how Purview actually looks in action. This here is the landing page. So once you've created your Purview account, your Purview resource group on Azure, you usually get redirected to Purview Studio, and this is the landing page for it. one thing I want to point out right from the beginning is that this landing page will look different for you depending on what role is assigned to you. So as you can see here on the bottom, there are 5 different roles. The highest one, kind of the king in the court, is the account creator. The account creator can do many things, basically everything you can do in Purview, whereas all the way at the bottom you have the data reader. The data reader can't access certain things and it can only read, so it's a very passive role. But you need these kind of differentiation between roles to enhance security in Purview. You don't want everybody to mess around with your data assets and your data estate. So it's a security feature. It's much needed, but I just pointed it out because your Purview Studio might look different depending on what role is assigned to you. And then again, just going to each number here, you have the name of the catalog. You have a quick analytics tab that shows you, how big your catalog is, how many data sources are connected to it, how many assets you have, etc., etc. You can search the catalog. This is kind of the heart of the whole application. This is where you find your data. This is where you get access to it. So I'll show you guys later how that works. You have a quick access bar where you can connect to certain things you've done in the past. You have a tab for recently accessed files. And then here on the left, you have the navigation tab. So this is where each of the key feature resides. So you have the home tab, which is the Purview Studio landing page. You have the sources tab. This is where you connect sources to Purview. You need to do that in order to scan them. Excuse me. Next, you have the glossary terms. As I mentioned earlier, you can define glossary terms to help people to understand your data. Next, you have the Insights tab. And again, I'll show you guys how each of these tabs works in detail later. And then lastly, you have the Management tab. Again, here you have links to documentation, as well as usually as in Azure, you have kind of a notification tab all the way at the top. The next thing I want to do is I want to walk through, a usual step-by-step process of how you would scan your data. And the first thing you would need to do is you would need to register sources. In our case, we already have 30 data sources registered with Purview, so we don't need to register a source. We can simply click on sources and select a source to scan. So that's what I've done here. As you can see here, it's kind of shaded out, but you can kind of see your different sources residing in different data centers. You have North America, Europe, and Azure and BI North America. I want to scan this data lake storage. There's a little scan button right next to it. Once you click it, the scan wizard opens, and the scan wizard will basically walk you through the whole scan process. The scan process is super unique and super detailed. You scan, you can search for over 100 different classification types. These classification types are built in from Microsoft, and they have developed them over time with experience. As I mentioned earlier, Microsoft has developed a software called Microsoft Information Protection in the past. They've also had a software called Data Catalog, so they know how to classify things. And this is what you can use. You can, for example, classify for email addresses. You can search for columns. Okay, this column is an email address. Is this column a security ID? Is it a American license plate number? Is it a passport number? All kinds of different things. Again, there are over 100 of them. If this classification or none of these classification match your needs, you can obviously define your own classifications. You can choose the scope of your scan. So you can say, okay, I want to scan in this data lake storage, but I want to only scan certain folders. I don't want to scan the entire thing. You can also set scan triggers. So you can say, okay, I want to scan once a day, once a week, once a month, only once. So it's pretty customizable and pretty neat. Here again, you can see you can even search the files. So you can say, okay, I don't want to scan CSV files. You can uncheck the box. You can create your own file types if you have specific files laying around in your data storage. So there's a lot of freedom for you to do whatever you want and to find all the files you will need to find. Then again, lastly, on the right, you can, as I mentioned earlier, select the scope of your scan. You can see, okay, I actually want to scan everything. Then you would select everything, or you wouldn't. Then you would deselect certain columns. Okay, so once the scan is completed, you can then go on and go back to the Home tab and search the catalog. So in this case, I've searched for revenue, and the semantic search feature of Purview has suggested me, with certain suggestions for searching, as well as suggestions for assets I want to click on. So I could click on, right away, I could click on the tax revenue table and I would get redirected to the tax revenue table. For some reason, Purview thought that, okay, revenue is related to tax revenue. It's probably a very smart relation, and I can use that. However, if I just hit enter, then I get redirected to a new window. In this case, I filtered the new window, so you can tell here that I filtered by the glossary term worldwide sales. There are 4 results here. You can see. You can also see the 4 results here. Again, you can filter by glossary terms, by classification, by contact, to get what you need within seconds. So I click on revenue by customer, and once I do this, I get to this overview page. And from my understanding, this overview page is where most of the understanding happens. So as you can see here, the overview page gives you information about the classifications. Purview has found 6 different classifications in this file. One thing I want to point out is that these little lightnings or sparks or arrows, I don't know how to call them, they mean that those are built-in classifications. So this is a built-in classification from Purview. Purview knows how to detect persons' names. Purview also knows how to detect email addresses. And then all the other classifications, they have been manually selected by us or created by us. So you can do that in order to be more specific to classification. Then again, here at the bottom, you have operational metadata. What time was the file created? What time was it last modified? The size of the file. It also gives you information about the hierarchy of the file. It's a pretty cool feature, I think. It shows you, okay, it sits in this SQL server, in this database. That's the schema, and that's the name of the actual table. It's also tagged as confidential, probably because there's a person name in it and as well as an email address. So you know right away it's something to take care of. Next, if you go to schema, you get an even more detailed view of it. So you get information about each column in the file. You get information about the data type in each column, as well as the classification applied to each column. Again, glossary terms, you can tell them, or you can see them and tell where Purview has detected certain glossary terms. The next thing I want to point out is the lineage. This is my favorite feature because it's visualized and it's very easy to tell, you have your revenue by customer table here in the middle. How does that relate to our data state in general? So you can tell here that this table actually is a combinations of 3 tables, which have been prepped and transformed to then create this table. And then this table actually is used to create this Power BI dashboard. You can use this Power BI dashboard right away from here. There's no need to export it. It's pretty super easy to link to Azure Purview. So it's a very neat feature, and it helps you to understand, where data comes from and where it goes. And it's not complicated. You don't have to build it yourself. And Microsoft has done a very good job from my point of view to do that here. And then next, kind of stepping one step ahead is the bird's eye view with insights. So now, instead of looking at individual data pieces, we look at our data state in general. And this is, again, going back to the Purview Studio. This is this tab right here, the light bulb. You click on it, and it will give you to Azure Insights. And as you can see, you get insights about assets, scans, glossaries, classifications, data movement, sensitivity labels, and file extensions. You can basically browse through them, and they are intended to give you a very quick understanding of how your data looks like. So here, for example, you can see that most of your data comes from the ADLS Gen 2 storage, and the least amount of data comes from the SAP ECC. You have so many data sources. You have discovered 76 million data assets, and you've classified a little bit more over half of them. Again, going through the scan insights, you have run so many scans in the past, so many have failed, so many have been successful. Again, glossary insights as well. Looks like this company is highly associated with retail and customer. So that's why you have credit card number shows up a lot, retail shows up a lot, customer shows up very, very much. So it kind of gives you an understanding of how you've structured your data and how you've classified it, to understand within literally minutes how your data states look like. those were kind of the main features for Azure Purview. But now the big question is obviously how expensive it is and how does pricing work. And pricing actually is not very straightforward. You are essentially getting charged per capacity unit. One capacity unit is 40 cents per hour, but obviously that doesn't mean anything because you have to understand how Microsoft builds you for those capacity units and what a capacity unit is. So a capacity unit can be two things. It can either be 25 operations per second. So an operation is anything that deals with your data in Purview. It's searching for data, it's renaming an asset, classifying an asset, all kinds of things you can do. And if you exceed 25 operations per second at one point, then you get moved up to the next capacity unit. That's the one way you can be classified as a capacity unit. The second way is to use metadata storage. Obviously, the more data you classify and the more data you scan, the bigger your metadata storage will be. And you can see kind of here on the right that this storage grows over time as you scan more and more. Now, the way you get billed for it is you get billed by it for hour. So, and you always get billed for the larger of the two ways for the capacity unit. So as you can see here in hour one, the operations per second as well as the metadata storage were both at 1 capacity unit per hour. So you get billed for 1 capacity unit per hour. Then here in the second hour, your operations graph for some reason shot up. Maybe you were scanning a lot and it's higher than the metadata storage. So in this case, you get billed for 3 capacity units per hour. Again, hour 3, you get billed for 4. I think you kind of get the gist now that you get always paid for whatever is higher. And then you can kind of see how much it costs. So let's see, in a given month, there are 720 hours. So if you just have 1 capacity unit running every day, 24 hours a day, that means 720 times 40 cents, around $300 a month just for having 1 capacity unit per hour. And obviously most of the time you will be using a little bit more. So let's say on average you use 3 capacity units per hour in a given month. There will be 3 times as much. So the whole service will cost you $900 a month. This means that Azure Purview is not cheap. It will cost you almost 10 grand a year. And depending on what company you are and how big your organization is, that means that different organizations will most likely not use Purview. For example, small organizations that are just starting out, I don't see big motivations for them to use Purview. However, companies that are huge, for example, large organizations that want to understand their data, they want to track them, that want to protect themselves for liability reasons, for them, $10,000 or even 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, that's nothing for them because, you know, liability charges can reach into the millions. So for them, Purview is probably a very great investment, and it makes sense to pay that kind of money. Lastly, however, it's not perfect yet. There's still a lot of room for improvement. There's a limited list of data sources. So far, it's only 21, so you can only scan 21 data sources. If you look at services like Power BI, where you can literally import data in 100 plus ways, then the number 21 seems pretty small. You can't really classify zip content, and oftentimes, you know, so many files are zipped. Then there are still some bugs with the UI. For example, in the data catalog, you can't delete assets once they're classified. I don't know who coded that, but it's a pretty weird dynamic. Also, so far, the maximum storage is 32 gigabytes for 16 capacity units. I believe this is because it's still in public preview, because once really, really big companies enter the usage for Purview, then 32 gigabytes won't be enough for classifying their data. So hopefully they change it in the future. Again, there's no support for data marketplace. I'm assuming this will change too once they move to GA. And then lastly, one feature that I missed personally was that there's no support for automation and alerting, meaning that once your data state changes, I would like to get a notification from Purview to be alerted that, you know, I can do another scan, or it automatically does a scan. But for some reason, there is nothing like this in Purview. So yeah, there is still room for improvement, and they can definitely grow it. Cool. but yeah, this is all I have. I have some links and resources to you. I hope you guys all got the slides, and if there are any questions, then feel free to shoot them out now. Yeah, but that's it from me right now.
Okay, please stop the recording.
Okay.